I'm in Prague right now.
Oh, you're in Prague. You're not
Ooh.
in Italy anymore. Okay.
I'm not in Italy anymore. I left my earbuds in Italy.
Oh no.
Yeah, how are
What
you
time
doing?
is it? I'm doing well. Ming, what time is it where you are?
I think it's 3:45.
Oh my goodness. And I pulled the time card.
You mean 3:45 a.m.?
That's early.
Where are you? Oh my God.
I'm still on West Coast time, so that's the funny thing. So it's great.
Oh, how did you manage that? Because isn't this your like second week traveling?
Yeah, but I've been bizarrely having a lot of meetings around this time. So
Okay. Okay. Nice.
I see that your guitar is set up. I see that you have
Yes.
your apartment getting set
And,
up.
and John Wilson has just joined us.
Yeah, everything is
Oh, John's already here.
Right.
Welcome, John. John, you're at Davies right now, right? Ah, are you muted?
You're muted, John.
Sorry, you heard nothing I said then. No, I'm surrounded by keyboard instruments here. It's great to see you, Ming, and everyone.
Yeah.
How are you?
It's great to see you too.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Where are you in Davies? I don't even know.
This is where they keep the pianists when we're not on stage. It's that little. It's hidden. I think only there are keyboard instruments here, so nobody else would have any reason to be.
A whole bunch of keyboards and occasionally a keyboardist.
Exactly.
Well, great. Well, welcome. So we actually normally start like at 6:45 for some like preparatory things, and so feel free just to hang out, but
Sure.
and hop in and out. But one of our assistant conductors, Julia, is actually calling in from Michigan, and she's starting grad school there, and she's going to be giving a presentation on Gabriella Elena Frank. And so we're not starting for a little bit with piano, but we're going to invite her to actually open up the rehearsal. So, so welcome everybody that's already here. As you know, this is the second week of our summer series with BCCO, focusing on quilt songs. And we're doing a deep dive into these 5 wonderful pieces. And we're so excited because Julia was not here last week because she was traveling, but she is now here partially. She could only be here for the first few minutes of rehearsal today. And so she's going to join us to do a little bit of historical background on, like I mentioned, Gabriella LaFranc, and talk about some updates for her and what Michigan is like so far. And so, Julia, I'm going to hand it over to you and look forward to hearing. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Ming. Hello, everybody. It's so great to see you all. And it was great to chat with some of you who were logged on early. So yes, I have a presentation on one of our quilt song composers, Gabriella Elena Frank. Let me get my screen shared for us, and I have to remember to share my sound because that will come in later. All right, give me a thumbs up if you can see this PowerPoint presentation.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I see some thumbs up. Okay, thank you, Ignacio. So also, I apologize. My Wi-Fi is coming in a little in and out, so I apologize if my presentation gets a little stopped on your end, but we'll do our best here. Starting off with a little bit of biography. So Gabriella Elena Frank, on biography rather. So an American pianist and composer, Gabriella Elena Frank was born in Berkeley, California, local, at least no longer for me, but for you all local, in 1972. She is mixed race, so her father was of Lithuanian and Jewish heritage, while her mother was of Peruvian and Chinese descent. And her first exploration into composition as a vocation was as a high schooler at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music through a program designed for pre-college students. And since then, she studied at Rice University, where she received her bachelor's and master's degree, and at the University of Michigan, where she received her doctorate. She is really an incredible composer, and in 2017, she was included in the Washington Post's list of the 35 most significant women composers in history, which is really quite amazing. So here's a quote from her. She said, "I realized that I had found my mission. I wanted to, in a very general way, be as mestiza in my music as I was in my person." And mestiza meaning, I put at the bottom here, it's a term used to refer to a woman of mixed race, but specifically of combined European and Indigenous American ancestry. She continues, she says, "I'm multiracial, I'm multicultural, and I think that that's something deeply American." And she continues, "I love my country and I'm surrounded by daughters and sons of immigrants that contribute and work hard. That was uppermost in my mind then, and in the course of recent events in our country, it's uppermost in my mind now. It's something that has become more urgent in my work as a musician, not less so." So her musical style is very unique. In her studies at Rice and University of Michigan, she trained in the Western classical tradition, which is traditional of musical programs. But through her time specifically at University of Michigan, she became inspired by Hungarian composer Bela Bartok and Argentinian composer Alberto Ginastera. And these were both composers who embraced musical styles and traditions of their cultures while using the language of Western classical tradition at the same time. So Frank has spent time traveling around South America and diving into her cultural and Andean heritage to kind of weave together with her classical training at the same time. So talking about her style, her very unique style, she's written extensively in many genres, including for orchestra, for band, wind, and brass ensembles, for chamber ensembles, solo works for various instruments, works for a cappella chorus, choral orchestral works, and opera, which I think she'll have an opera premiered this year, which is very exciting. So some ways that she combines South American or Peruvian musical elements into her style includes one, incorporating or almost mimicking, in a sense, the sounds of traditional Andean instruments, like the panpipe or the tarka, which is a wooden flute, which we'll hear in just a moment. And so she uses traditional Western acoustic classical instruments to kind of mimic some of these traditional instruments, Andean instruments. She will also integrate native musical styles and melodies. And then also she writes programmatic or texted music that's inspired by Peruvian folklore, mythology, or poetry. She said about her own music, "There is usually a storyline behind my music, a scenario or a character." So there's a lot to listen for. Speaking of listening, I thought we could listen to a couple of her works together, segments of her works, to get an idea of her style and her sound. So first we have the second movement from Leyendas, an Andean Walkabout. This was originally composed for string quartet in 2001, and later was arranged for string orchestra in 2003. This is a composer's note that she wrote about the work. She says, "An Andean Walkabout draws inspiration from Peruvian writer Jose Maria Arguedas, where cultures can coexist without the subjugation of one by the other. As such, this piece mixes elements from the Western classical and Andean folk music traditions." Torqueda, which is the second movement here that we'll listen to, is a forceful and fast number featuring the tarka, which is a heavy wooden duct flute that I mentioned earlier, that's blown harshly in order to split the tone. Tarka ensembles typically also play in fourths and fifths, which you'll hear, specifically in the violin solo that you'll hear. So this performance is by New England Conservatory Philharmonia. It's conducted by Elena Gonzalez Granados and live streamed and socially distanced performance given in October of 2020, so a recent performance. And this is the second movement, Tarqueda. So let's see if this works here, this embedded movie. a very, very movement of a very cool, larger work. I would recommend looking up the full piece to listen through. So that was Tarkeda. And now this next piece, I have one more piece to kind of listen through together. This one showcases that storyline or character that Frank mentioned that you can usually find in her music. So while that last segment kind of showcased an Andean instrument, now we're kind of looking at a story, mythology, folklore. So here is her composer's note. I'll read for you. In Andean Peru, spirits are said to inhabit rocks, rivers, and mountain peaks with the intent of keeping a watchful eye on travelers passing through highland roads. The Apu is one of the more well-known spirits that is sometimes portrayed as a minor deity with a mischievous side who is rarely seen. Simple folk song and a solemn prayer often successfully placate the Apu to ensure safe passage through the mountains. We will listen now just to the opening section together, which, as Frank continues to describe, begins with a short folkloric song inspired by the agile pinkilo flute, which is a small, slender instrument that packs well into the small bags of travelers who must travel light. As we listen to this, you'll hear the kind of mischievous sound. It's really great. So this is commissioned by Carnegie Hall and performed by the National Youth Orchestra with Maren Alsop conducting. Here is the beginning of Apu Tone Poem for Orchestra. All right. That is just the first 2.5 minutes about of the longer 15-minute work. So I hope that caught your attention, and I hope you're writing down the title so you can go explore the rest of that wonderful piece. So now, after we've, I don't mean to start again. After we've listened through a couple of her pieces and gotten a sense for her style, let's talk a little bit about kind of her professional accolades and her professional life as a composer. So Gabriela Lena Frank has been awarded many fellowships and awards and prizes and recognition for her work. So she's been awarded a Latin Grammy award in 2009 for her piece Inca Dances, if you'd like to look that up. She's also been nominated for Grammy Awards as both a composer and a pianist, for which she specializes in contemporary works, and she's very sought after as well as a soloist. She's been awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship in 2009, a USA Artist Fellowship, a Brillante Award by the Hispanic Scholarship Foundation for personifying limitless potential, which is amazing, and a Sphinx Medal of Excellence. And I'm sure, well, these awards or fellowships were offered either in acknowledgement of her artistry or in support of furthering some of her projects that she was working on. And I'm sure there may be more awards, but these are the ones that I could find while I was researching her. But it would not surprise me if she had been awarded additional support or fellowships. She's worked as a composer or artist in residence for many major orchestras and organizations, including the Philadelphia Orchestra, where she currently collaborates, the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, the Houston Symphony, the San Francisco Chamber Orchestra, Los Angeles Philharmonic, and she has served as the creative advisor to local Berkeley Symphony as well. Some of her recent commissions have come from Yo-Yo Ma and the Silk Road Ensemble, the Chiara Quartet, the Indianapolis Symphony, the Kronos Quartet, Chanticleer, Don Upshaw and the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, and Ballet Hispanico. And at the same time, while she's so engaged writing commissions and working and collaborating with these major ensembles, she's also at the same time very passionate about community and civic engagement. So she's volunteered in hospitals and prisons and has also worked with deaf African American high school students in Detroit who rap in sign language, which is awesome. Being hearing impaired herself, she's engaged in communities that support musicians that are deaf or non-hearing. And as a fun tangent, she's not the only composer of a quilt song that has worked with deaf or non-hearing community. Dr. Isai Barnwell, who composed Nearly Insane, I believe, also has worked with deaf or non-hearing communities musically. She actually came and worked with some of my high school students and gave had a Zoom call with my high school students last September, because we were working on some a couple of songs that were performed by Sweet Honey in the Rock, which is one of the ensembles that she sang with. And in that ensemble, they had an interpreter for all performances interpret as they sang up on stage. And Dr. Barnwell was actually the interpreter for a long while. So that's just a fun fact about quilt songs, is that 2 of your 5 composers also work with deaf and non-hearing communities musically, which is great. So finally, in 2016, Dr. Frank developed the Gabriella Lena Frank Creative Academy, which offers a year-long apprenticeship opportunity for rising composers. So it's a mentorship opportunity, the composer equivalent to what Ming has developed at BCCO for assistant conductors. So here, composers have the opportunity for private lessons. They have a laboratory ensemble to play through their compositions in progress. They speak with mentor performers who offer valuable practicums of their instrument and offer feedback to the fellows on how to write idiomatically for their instrument. There are outreach events for local communities, participation in master classes, and after the in-person portion, the fellows then return home and then continue the program virtually to then also build the skills on how do you collaborate as a composer when you're not in residence. Right? How do you collaborate with your performing musicians from afar? So lots of really important skills that are passed on through that mentorship as well. And as part of that Creative Academy, she also offers distance learning for all artists, different classes. And one of her intensives that she offers is a special topic class on climate intelligence in action for artists, where they discuss the role of an artist in creating stories from and attaching meaning to and expressing the feeling of emergency for our climate crisis, which is very unique, I think, and very needed and very, very cool and interesting. So that is my short presentation on Gabriela Lena Frank. I hope you enjoyed learning a bit more about one of your composers that was commissioned for a quilt song. And I hope it gives you more context as you continue to learn her movement.
Julia, thank you so much.
Yay.
Hear from you. So just before we let you go and everything, how are things in Michigan? Because I think we have more people that are signed on now.
Yeah, things are great in Michigan so far. It's been raining so often, which I know is something we're all missing in California. So it was an immediate switch, but I've met a couple of the doctoral students, and they kind of gave me a tour around and were telling me about the classes that we're taking and what to expect and giving me advice and everything. So I am, now that I'm back from traveling vacation, like to get here, I'm kind of trying to get back into the mindset after I've unpacked and everything of, okay, let's get in the saddle and prepare for the semester.
And when does school actually begin? When do your first classes?
Classes begin August 30th, so I still have about 3 weeks of time to settle in and prepare.
That's fantastic. And the classes you're teaching, aren't you? You're assisting with a chorus, right?
Yeah. Yes. So it's interesting. Yeah. So I'm assisting with the Women's Glee Club on campus. So I'm the assistant conductor, which is actually a very special opportunity because it's very rare for a first year's master student to be offered an assistantship because they normally go to doctoral students. But it just worked out this way that it was kind of passed down and it was offered to me. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity, and I'm very excited to work with the treble ensemble and to continue on working as an assistant too. And I know that I have all the skills. Thank you, Ming, for giving me the skills to be an assistant.
Well, we're excited to hear updates, and we're excited to hear you, obviously, as classes go on. So thank you so much for joining us. I know it's late there, but we'd love to see you whenever we can. So, yeah.
Thank you for having me, and have fun with the rest of rehearsal. It was great to see everybody. Yeah, have a great evening.
Great. Okay. So I'm going to take over for a little of Paul's segment on sight singing. And what I want to do is provide some sight singing exercises and actually show a little bit about how we break down things for, let me see if we can share two up. So these are some sight singing rhythms, and obviously when we talk about sight singing, there are so many different things that you can look at. You can look at rhythm, you can look at the notes, you can look at dynamics or whatnot. And good sight reading really tries to incorporate as much information as possible. So, as we go through these, I want you to not only look at these, but also the only way to get better at sight singing is really honestly to do it as many times as you can, as much as you can. And one of the ways that one of my courses when I was in high school used to do it was every single time we started rehearsal, we'd have sight singing and just kind of doing it over and over again and getting more and getting used to the patterns. And so that's a little bit what was impetus behind having this summer session actually include a little bit of sight singing in advance of the rehearsal proper each time to be able to give us a little bit more exposure and experience just kind of diving into these things. And so, some of these might look very easy, but the key always is to try to figure out as much information incorporated as possible. So for instance, if we're looking at number one, and John, just for your awareness, we used to do actually some things that were on simultaneous sound, but this rehearsal is actually all Zoom based. And so later on, it'll be something for you to when we're playing parts, but I'll get to that in a bit, but you're part of it for a little bit. But in any case, so everybody, what we're gonna read is, we're gonna read some of these lines, but the very first thing that you should immediately try to notice is what the key signature, the time signature is, as well as what actually gets the actual beat. And so if you're looking at number one, obviously the time signature is 2/4. And if you remember what those mean, it means that there's 2 beats per bar and that 1 quarter note equals the beat. And so you're looking at these rhythms, and you note that there are 2 eighth notes, quarter notes. You can see some dotted rhythms, there's a half note, but regardless, a quarter note gets the beat. And so there are a lot of different ways to go about this. Some people actually have different syllables for the different types of rhythm. So it used to be that tas were chord notes and ts were eighth notes. You can do whatever you want. You can go ta, 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 everything would be a ta. But there are some sight singing methods where you try to devise a certain type of syllable for like triplet, ti, ti, ta. Whereas T's will have a division of the beat into eighth notes or whatever it is, a division of the beat itself, tas or the beat itself. And then you can have triplets or dotted rhythms or whatnot. So let's go read through, and I'm just going to read it with you. So again, we can't hear you, but it'll just be good to try to read through some of these. So if I'm looking at the first one, which is 2/4, 2 beats to the bar, quarter note equal the beat, then I'm going to be thinking 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 as the beat. And so you get that inner rhythm going. And that inner rhythm is the most key thing that we have for every single singer as well as ensemble. Because ensembles, we all try to tap into the rhythm. And when I talk about rehearsal in chorus with a lot of people, or ensemble with a lot of people in instrumental group too, the ensemble inner pulse is really critical, because you can mess up notes, you can mess up dynamics, but that inner pulse is the most basic and key thing that you have in sight singing. So if in orchestra you have certain instrument groups that are starting to rush, it can actually pull the entire ensemble off together. And in singing, the same thing too. It doesn't make a difference what notes you sing, the most basic thing is the rhythm. If you can keep the ensemble rhythm together, then it's really important. So reading from the very beginning, 2/4, again, we can establish that pulse. 1, 2, let's make that tempo. 1, 2, let's read this together. And I'm gonna read this together and start. Here we go, 1, 2, here we go. Ti, ti, ta, ta, ti, ti, ta, ta, ti, 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 ta, rest. Ti, ti, ta, ti, ti, ti. Oh, my screen is broken, so I can't read the last one. Ah, ta. The last bar is ti, ti, ta, okay? And so again, you can do this on whatever syllable you want to, but the key is that you can maintain that consistent pulse. Sometimes I actually end up conducting along with myself because I find it helpful to indicate where the bars are or whatever. Let's look at number 2. So immediately you see the time signature is different than the first one. And so this one has 3 beats to the bar, which is, and a chord note equals the beat. You see that there's some flags a little further down the way. Sometimes when you're reading, you're constantly scanning ahead while also singing. And so getting used to seeing ahead in music is actually a key part. We're actively processing the music that we're singing while also looking ahead. So again, you try to establish a beat, ta, 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 ta. So we can just try this together. Everybody sing 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Try that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And that is your basic pulse that's there. And then let's try this. You see that there's 16 notes, they're rests. Now, when we have this with kids, we actually have them clap along, but then show something for rest. So if I did the first 2 bars, and you see that my hands actually show a rest, that's to give the idea of a pulse, even though there's no sound. And so let's do this for this one, a clapping exercise. Instead of going ta, or you can actually do ta, ta, ts with you're saying it while you do it. But I want you to, because this one actually has a little bit more rest. So for instance, the first 2 bars, again. And then you see that actually when 1, 2, rest, that will give you that inner pulse when you have long lines. And for singers, that oftentimes is really important because we end up hitting a long note and we start losing count immediately, right? It's that idea that underneath music, whatever you have, is that inner pulse that guides you throughout. And then so when we talk about divisions of the pulse, those are the eighth notes or the or the 16th notes, or whatever inner rhythms that are there. But you have the guiding inner pulse, that is the beat, and then you have the subdivisions. And so when we talk about like triplets versus duples or dotted rhythms, which BCCO, we love to sometimes swing, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's supposed to be swung. Those are the type of things that are based off of that inner pulse, as well as the division of the pulse. And so let's try this one as a clapping exercise, starting from, this is again, exercise number 2. And we're gonna start together. And again, I'm gonna count off 2 bars of 3. So we're gonna count together 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then go. And then again, see if you can try this where you, when you have a rest, you actually show a rest, like the second bar, tap, tap, rest, 2, rest. And that when you have long notes, you actually still have, you have a guiding pulse that's still underneath. Okay, here we go. So here we go. And 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Especially for the last note even. 1, 2, 3, before you have off. And the same thing, you know, in choruses, we often say, you know, well, every ensemble, you say the attack of the note is just as important as the very end of the note. And so really counting those 3 beats at the very end before you cut off is really important. Now, that was our first time through. A lot can be learned through going through a piece, not only once, but second time, to see how much you can get on the second time. So actually, why don't we try this one again and see if we can get that and work on, immediately make a note. Oh, I messed up that one part before. I want to try that, make sure that I get that next section. Okay, let's try number 2 again. Again, 1, 2, 3, here we go. Rest. Rest. And then make sure that you really count for the 1, 2, 3, R. Okay. Let's do another one. Why don't we skip number 3? Now the C that you see there, just because, oops, I see chat. I want to make sure that I don't miss anything in chat. Okay. Let's look at the difference between the time signatures between 3 and 4. There is no difference between C, which is common time, and then 4/4. So the C means 4 chord notes for the bar. And so even though 3 and 4 look very, very different in terms of the rhythms that they have, it is really the same time signature. But what I want to look at is actually number 4, because 4, we have our first change of division of the beat. And so you have sometimes a beat divided into 4 with 16 notes. Sometimes you have a beat divided into 2 with 8 notes. And then sometimes you have the beat divided with triplets in 3. And so again, if I have a beat, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, right? You have 1, 2, 3, 4, you have a divided into 4, you have a divided into 3, 1, 2, 3, triplet, triplet. You have 8 notes, T, 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 T. So what I want to do is just chord notes first. We're going to just sing ta, 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 ta. Try that. Ta, 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 ta. Okay, that's really basic, right? And then 8 notes. T, 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 T. Here we go. And T, 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 T. Those are just complete straight 8 notes dividing the beat into 2. Now, dividing into triplets, we say triplet, 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 triplet. Very, very easy. Let's try that. 1, 2, and triplet, 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 triplet. Okay, that's really easy to remember. And then for chord notes, I do the ticka ticka. Some people do tiri tiri, but I go ticka 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 ticka. Okay, and so let's try that. Ticka 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 ticka. 1, 2, here we go. Ticka, 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 okay? So now we have our chord notes divided into 4 with ticka tickas. We have it into 3s as triplets. We have it into 2s as TT, And then we have the beat as ta. Now these rhythm syllables again are just one method. You don't necessarily have to do that. You can make up your own ta 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 whatever. But this is a good one to try to distinguish between certain subdivisions of the beat. So let's try number 4 and just again dive into it. Okay, here we go. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ticka ticka tee tee ta rest. Ta triplet ta rest. Ta triplet ta rest rest. Tee tee ta. Ticka ticka tee 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 rest. Triplet ta rest. Now, did you notice for me, I actually say rest. Again, the same thing as the sort of open hands to really give you sort of an actual thing to say during that. And then if you notice the second to last bar, they tried to be really tricky here. And it's actually incorrect notation because all of the time before that was 4/4. But depending on the music, it might actually be correct. You have those eighth notes barred in groups of 2 as well as a group of 4. And so it can throw you off a little bit, but it means absolutely nothing. It just means that group of 4 it needs to be combined for some reason. But those are just straight eighth notes. We look for how many flags there are. Why don't we just do one more just to dive in, and let's do number 7. 7 will be a little fun. Okay, 7, the same time signature 4/4, and that means the chord note is the beat. Eighth notes are a subdivision of the beat, and let's make this one. Why don't we do clapping and speaking if you want to? Okay, and sight singing for me too. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 2 bars. Sorry, I'll count off 2 bars again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we go now. T T ticka ta T T ta T ticka ta T ticka ta 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 T T ta rest. Right now, that was kind of a very militaristic actually exercise there. Let's try that one again. Ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we go now. T T ticka T T T ta. And again, the goal is always with learning, is that if you get it 100% right, then you should be looking at things that are slightly harder. If you get it 0% right, you should be looking at things that are slightly easier. The sweet spot is anywhere between 60 to 80% correct. And so again, if it's not perfect, that's perfectly fine. Learning is occurring. If it feels like every beat is a struggle and you're falling behind for everything, then you can go back and try to find some easier exercises. But the goal always with learning is to find that sweet spot of 60 to 80% where you're always working. Now, I just want to do a couple things before we head into the rehearsal proper in 7 minutes. But let's add some notes here. And so when you're looking at sight singing, you know, obviously the contour of the line is really important. The most basic thing is the music going up or down. Is it by stepwise motion? Are there leaps? What is actually there? And so, you know, we have the rhythm now, but we have some notes added to it. So if you look at number 1, we're looking at the time signature is common time, which we know already, we just talked about, is the same as 4/4, which means that there are 4 beats to the bar and 4 chord notes. And then we have a key signature too. The key signature is 1 flat. And so since I have chat on and I see people have found the actual PDF of the packet, that's fantastic because then you can take it and kind of go through by yourself too. Or maybe do sight singing fun with other people. And part of the best thing about sight singing is that you can go through and just read songs that you know or songs that you don't know, or we used to do in school, like a lot of Bach chorales because we had to get used to singing in like soprano clef. If you go through this and you look at the key signature to get an idea of whether you're starting in major or minor. So 1 flat, what is the possible keys for this? Anybody? Just type it into the chat if you know. F, yeah, F major or D minor, right? And so, excuse me, F major If you see a lot of Fs and Cs because C is the dominant, then you're like probably we're in F major. If you see a lot of Ds, you know, like Ds and As, ooh, this is squeaky piano. Then you're in probably D minor. But this is an F major, of course, and so this is a key to establish a key. Ignore my parallels. Sorry, I have to do this. So that's F major. So we're starting on F. And what I want to do is I'm going to conduct through it, and you're going to just dive in without listening to anything. We're not going to be able to hear you. So if you get everything wrong, if you don't even end up at the same place, that's perfectly fine. And then we'll go through a second time, and I'll play it, or John will play it. And we'll hear how it sounds, okay? So again, that's a key, that's your opening pitch. And I'm gonna conduct along and then give a certain beat of the chord notes just to make sure that we're aligned together. And let's try this together. Here we go. 1, 2, again, 2 bars before we go. So here we go now. Ta, ta, ta. Make sure that you're muted. Bar 5, 3, 4. That's great. In my effort not to sing along, I was doing something called audiation, which is that you're mentally singing. And they found out through brain studies, and actually not just brain studies, but looking at your throats, that when you mentally sing, your vocal folds are actually mimicking what you would actually normally do. And so it's just, so when we have opera singers, we say oftentimes, even if you're on the bus and you can't actually sing, you should go through your music and just kind of mentally go through it, because it actually still rehearses some of those same muscles. And of course, rehearses your brain in terms of what to anticipate, what you're listening for, okay? So those were the 8 bars. We're gonna play through it now. Let me just play this here. I think, can you hear can you hear the piano okay? Okay, so I'm gonna play from the piano, and let's sing along again. So if you want to do the syllables, do, re, mi, fa, sol, sol, la, la, sol, feel free to do that. But again, the only thing is to try to challenge yourself where you are. If you want to do the rhythms, ti, 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 ta, 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 ta. If you want to wait to try to sing along with the piano and whatnot, go ahead. The goal is simply to just push yourself to see where you are. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 bars before we begin. So this is a nice exercise because it has repetition, it has stepwise motion, it has some skips that are not too large, thirds, and then it has some rests at the end. Ta, 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 or do, do, re, ti, do, off. But it also has a la, fa, sol, mi, sol, la, sol, in bars 3 and 4. So it's got a nice exercise there. In our 1 minute before our rehearsal begins proper, why don't we actually look at another one? Why don't we look at number 3? Because 3 is very similar to number 1. But if you see, it's got the same key signature, but we don't see that many Fs, but we do see a lot more Ds. And so this is actually in D minor. And then same thing, let me move. So this is D, this is your D. And let's read it through a couple times before our rehearsal begins proper. So, and then you can challenge yourself if this looks really easy. You can do La bass minor, La, ti, do, re, mi, fa, fa, mi. Or you can go do, re, mi, fa, so, le, so. Or you can just do the rhythms, or you can just sing along with ta. You can do whatever you want to challenge yourself. This one's actually a little tricky because the last note looks like, second to last note looks like it's natural minor instead of melodic minor. So you're gonna have to sing a slightly different syllable. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, silent, 2, and go. Great. Now, let's try this with piano accompanying along. And again, if you need a challenge, try to memorize it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 bars before we begin. So we start right now. I love that ending because you want the second last note to actually be T, but it's ta. Da, 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 da. It's not that. No. You know. It's got a lot of fun parts. Okay, great. So it is 7:30, so our rehearsal proper is about to begin. I'd like to just welcome, of course, John Wilson, who is a fantastic pianist and is actually accompanying us to replace Paul today. But he's actually at Davies Symphony Hall right now because he is in, as he mentioned, the keyboard room. And so we can, let me see, add spotlight. How do we want to make sure that we add spotlight. Add spotlight.
Hello, pleasure to be with you all. Hey, Ming.
Hey. So there, the two of us. Wait, what happened? Okay, so I'm gonna do this. Let me just add the spotlight. There. For some reason, Zoom is, I don't know if somebody else is doing this, but Zoom is not allowing for two. I don't know if everybody else sees two, but I only see one person at a time, and then I try to add a spotlight, and it flashes for a second. Okay, any case. Well, John, you have oh, I see. It's responding to the sound itself, but we're both spotlight.
Oh.
Okay, great. Well, John is a fantastic pianist, and is joining us for rehearsal today. So welcome, John, and of course, it's always great to have you. John's been filling in as pianist for San Francisco Symphony for this entire, most of the season, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
How are things at the symphony right now? Are they starting to come up to?
Yeah, I mean, the audience has been great. It's really, the attendance is fantastic here and at the Stanford Auditorium, and we're doing a John Williams program this week, so it's fun for everyone.
Oh, that's, yeah, exactly, fun for everybody. There's a lot of piano in that too. What's on the program?
Harry Potter, so I'll be using that all war rehearsed behind me, and
Yeah,
you know, Star Wars, Jaws, the classics.
Yeah. There's a lot of celeste in a lot of John's work, so that's great. Welcome. So so what we do is I might have you just, again, what I noted before is that these rehearsals are Zoom based, and so because there's a delay from where I am to where you are, whenever there's sound with the music with you, I'm actually going to have you actually count them off into the beginning of the vocal exercise or whatnot. It'll be a weird delay otherwise. And then for warm-ups, since I actually have access to a piano right now, I might do a little bit of it. But then when we get to the rehearsal proper, we'll just start. So
sounds great.
Okay, great. So everybody, let's start with our warm-up first. And so again, same thing as always. I'm in a lobby, but you want to stand up. You want to get your body all physically set. And I can see you. Remember, we can all see you. So definitely stand up and try to get your bodies relaxed and stretched out a little bit. And this is not only to warm up the body, but this is also, again, as we talked about, for physical awareness of the muscles that are used for singing and engagement. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have good posture, feet shoulder width apart, twist at the waist a little bit, because then what you're going to do is that you want to make sure that from your waist on down is about posture and flexibility, and making sure that everything above that is really in a good place for posture as well as getting ready for singing. And then so when you have your knees slightly bent and your weight on the balls of your feet, that's where we're most ideal. So when we do things like, lift up on your toes, tippy toes, that's an exercise really just to get you back on the balls of your feet. When we have you shift side to side, it's the same thing. It's very hard to shift side. Well, you could shift side to side on your heels, but when you shift side to side, you're really doing that on the balls of your feet, and it's to center yourself to make sure you're set. And then finally, when you like bend your knees slightly, but your height doesn't change, that's to the awareness that you can have a little bit of buoyancy in your knee without locking them. When you lock your knees, you actually cut off circulation a little bit. And so that's when people faint, that's when people have sight issues. And so you want to make sure that your knees are buoyant, everything from the waist down is sort of energized, as if any second you could actually move, right? And because singing is so physical, you want to make sure that your posture is really set. Now, when we start warming up the upper part of the body, again, more of your muscles are going to be involved in singing. So when we say twist at the waist, what I immediately feel are those intra and intercostals. Those are your rib muscles, right? You can feel them engaging as well as your, your stomach. And so you try to be aware of those muscles, because those muscles, when you start to breathe in, you want to be aware and conscious of activating them or sort of engaging them. And so that's what's involved. When I say raise the shoulders, like you raise your shoulders, whatnot, you remember that if you see a picture of a skeleton, your arm and your scapula, your shoulder blades or whatnot, and clavicles or whatnot, those rest above the rib cage. All they can do is they can hinder and crimp your lung capacity in your rib cage, or they can get out of the way. And so when we lift them, we're trying to loosen up the muscles that engage them so that you can keep them likewise buoyant and energized without slouching forward, right? If you slouch forward, you're actually crimping part of the air capacity of your lungs. And if you pull too tight back, like if you're military straight up and down, it's the same thing too. You're actually pulling at some of the muscles that you need for singing. So you want to get your shoulder blades, your shoulders, and your arms nice and relaxed and loose. And so when we say to like wiggle arms or whatnot, that's part of the same thing. It's just trying to get your arms nice and loose. Let's do that a little bit, and to try them getting away from your torso, from your rib cage area. So your rib cage area, the same thing. The current style of singing is that your rib cage is pretty still, but that your expansion happens at your viscera, as well as your floating rib cage, your floating ribs, the ones that are right here, right? The ones that are not attached to the side. So what you're focusing on is pulling the viscera down and out in 360 degrees, and focusing on maintaining the same posture from the upper part of your body. There used to be many different singing styles, like the French style, where you raise your shoulders, right? There used to be, and that was mainly because women had corsets and were singing and they couldn't actually expand at the bottom. So the only way they could expand was through their shoulder blades, right? There's also a lot of different singing methods that have to do with like focusing on other areas. But the current one that we're doing is down and out. So again, legs below the waist has to do with posture and just keeping nice and energized. The same thing for your arms, just getting them sort of aware but out of the way. And then your posture is focused so that your upper torso and your ribs are sort of more static, but that you're focusing on your breathing down and out in 360 degrees. So when we take a breath in, we're going to breathe in and down and out. And then out is a controlled, slow exhalation of that all the way through. And then some people like to breathe in through the nose. And the reason why we breathe in through the nose is because oftentimes when you breathe in through the nose, you actually lift your soft palate. Because when you breathe in through the nose, you're trying to smell. So you're actually trying to get soft tissue out of the way so you can actually smell more. And so breathing in through the nose is really good for you, and then out through the mouth. So let's breathe in through the nose and then out on a shh, okay? Let's do this together or on your own time. But what we want to focus on is your posture, breathing down and out, and then slowly engaging the muscles on the way out with a shh. Here we go. And shh. Nice, consistent, even air that goes out. Shh. Keep on going. And then remember, don't try to eke out every last bit. If it's like a toothpaste where you're trying to squeezing for the tiniest bit of like toothpaste at the very end, that's not good. What you're trying to do is just keep even airflow throughout. And then opera singers train their very best to make it look like they're not having a lot of struggle while that's happening before they stop. It really should be like even airflow, and then I have to stop. Not even airflow and get softer and softer and less air until I squeeze out. That sort of squeezing out of the toothpaste is too much. Okay, now let's do this on a hum, and we're gonna go. But when you get to that last D, what I want you to do is really sustain that as much as you can and hold that note for as long as you can. Now remember from last week, remember the jaw, we're not doing, we're not doing a closed mouth hum, we're doing an open mouth hum and your lips are just barely touching. Versus, you see my jaw? I'm trying to exaggerate it, but. And so when you have your jaw released and down, it's like you can be singing if I just open up my lips a little bit, but I just have my lips barely closed, okay? And then, there, so there you go. And then hold this note for as long as you can. And then I want you to focus not on the singing anymore, but really on the engagement of your support and sustaining that note in an even airflow. Here we go. 1, 2, and up. Right? And so as it starts to waver a little bit, you want to make sure that your support is nice and consistent. Because what ends up happening is the more we support, even if it's pianissimo, that's when you need the most support, because that's when you sort of lose a little bit of air. And so for singers, singing pianissimo, high or low, wherever, is actually really quite difficult to maintain that nice airflow. Let's do that again. And go. And while you're doing this, see what areas of your viscera, what areas of your support come in first. Your floating rib cages, your back of your, the small of your back, and as you go through, and then again, it's like a toothpaste tube. For me, you want to think about, the expansion of the air slowly coming in, and then feeling like you're pulling up. So you don't collapse this way, but that you're pulling up the viscera this way to get that last bit of air, okay? And then last one, 2, and up. As long as you can go, right? Great. So those are the general tenets, of course. And then like we talked about last week, you're trying to warm up your body a little bit, warm up your vocal cords along the entire range. And then one of the ways we do that is a sigh, all the way up and down. So let's have everybody do that, nice and breathy, and really try to get to the upper range and all the way down to lower range. So for male voices, that flat is in falsetto. Never. I try that again. Okay. And then I actually do this sort of hand gesture, because what that does is it mimics your soft palate raised. I don't want to think about it collapsing, but I do want to think about that first stretch, like you yawn. And then your sound sort of emanating from the back and just kind of going forward. So when we do the sigh again, why don't you try it with the hand gesture there to mimic those muscles that you can't really see inside your mouth, but that you want to visualize raising. That soft palate that can come down, we want to raise it. Okay, here we go. Bang. Good. Now, let's do one of those sides again. And what I want you to do is end on any pitch in D major. So, or, I want you to take a sigh and then end on a pitch. Okay, here we go. Here's a D major and sigh. Now, if you're like me, you usually ended up on a pitch on the lower end. What I want you to do now is end up on a pitch on the higher end. Like that. Or and BC. Here we go again. Okay. The same sorry, drop jaw. So the second part of the warm-up vocalizing, remember, is about focusing. Oh, just want to make sure that, okay. So it's about focusing the sound. So closed vowels, have a little bit more ping in them than ah. And then for Americans especially, we can very, very easily sing oh, because we have a schwa, that sort of neutral syllable for us, which is kind of in the back of our throat. And so we have to work as singers, as Americans, to actually bring up the brightness of the sound a little bit for ah. So E and A, those two vowels are bright and forward. And so we use them to springboard an ah vowel to go ah instead of oh. And you don't want to make your ah like a UH. You want to make it ah. Some people say make sure you can see your upper front teeth, or you're going to bite into an apple. Ah. What you want to do is make sure your ah vowel doesn't spring backwards, and then the A vowel is going to help us with it. So here we go, and up. I've got a squeaky pedal here on this one. So you just make sure that your soft palate is lifted, as we talked about for the yawn side, as well. And again, this is vocal exercises. We can swing the pendulum too far in the other direction. That's perfectly fine, because when we get to singing, our goal is always to try to make sure that we're in a good place, and your exercises help you get there. Not that the exercises themselves have to be like the purest of singing. So when we do things like nasal, like nee, voo, nee, voo, nee, voo, nee, voo, nee, we would never sing like that except for some stylistic things in opera maybe. But you're using that to try to get really nasal and forward in your mouth, okay? Actually, let's do that one since we're here. Nee, voo, nee, voo, nee, voo, nee, voo, nee. Again, very forward and bright and nasal. And then one last exercise just for range with ya, ya. And what you want to make sure is that you start with a ya. And the same thing, we start with a ya because the E sound helps you make sure that you don't go ya, ya. Okay, here we go. And nice and light at the top. Buoyant. If it gets too high, just drop out. want to think clear space, and the more space that you have, the more that the notes are able to rest in that space. And so you can't sing high notes without space. However, you should bring that same sort of space when you sing low notes too, so you have the same range of the down. Okay, and let's do one more sigh together to relax. And great. Now let's look at some music. So we're gonna look first at the very beginning. Where is the music? Quilt songs. So the first piece that we're looking at is, again, Alice Parker's This Is the Garden. And last week, if you remember, we wanted to really divide this into groups of 2s and 3s. And so that when we have this, we're thinking like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And so what I'd love to do is first sing this with John, but what I want you to do is to only sing this on do, but really thinking do 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 rest do do sorry do 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 do. I want you to sing every single eighth note so that we have a consistent pulse. So let's just stumble through. And again, you might not get everything, but John, do you mind actually playing a little bit of the piano at the beginning so just we can hear how it sounds first?
Yeah, let's check the balance. So
yeah, that sounds pretty good. We're used to sustaining those down, do 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 do, because
yeah, were they?
They're a little bit staccato-ish, but
Oh,
I think it's just a sound dying.
it
But
must be clipping or something.
yeah, exactly. But in any case, I think that's gonna be great. So John's gonna lead us off through, but what I'd love to do is sing through a bit of this and a stumble through. Again, not everything's gonna be there, but the key thing that I want you to think about, like in our sight singing exercises, if you're here for that part of the rehearsal, is maintaining a connection to John's inner pulse that's there, and to have your inner pulse try to align with the eighth notes that are there. John, actually, why don't, for our purposes, that you actually play the eighth notes too. So, you know,
sure.
You provide everything to. Okay, here we go. John will lead us through.
You want me to give him one bar for nothing?
Yeah.
Okay. Same tempo?
Yeah, that sounds great.
So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Yeah. So it's such a beautiful piece. I like how everything is rooted on that E, right? So that E that you have throughout just comes back over and over again until the very end when the tenors have that line that comes out of the E and then ends on the E as well. And so that underlying pulse sounds a little bit artificial, right? It sounds like, oh my goodness, we're just sort of pounding away that eighth note over and over again. What's the point of that? And what ends up happening is that if you sing that without that idea of inner pulse, then the long notes suddenly dissipate into, we're just going to wait to see what the conductor does, or we're just going to guess at what the next entrance is. It's actually really, really hard to figure out where you're going on that. And so sometimes especially with orchestral music, if you're an instrument that plays in and out a little bit, sort of knowing where the rests are, knowing how long those intervals are sort of key to figuring out how to fit in. Now, I love this piece because I want you to look at bar 34 for a second. Now, for rhythm, this is, again, something that is really key. But you see that the first bar is a dotted quarter note, which means that there are 3 eighth notes. And then you have a half note, which is 4 eighth notes, of course. And it just looks normal. You say garden. So just if you like that. John, do you mind playing those pitches for that for a second? John, actually, John, do you have on your Zoom turn on original sound?
I did. Let me make sure that is still happening there. Or should I turn it off?
No, that should be good. I think what it is it's just reading some of the notes are. But again, I'm in Europe, so I think that the delay might be a little bit. So those pitches again, if you don't mind playing them from the bottom up.
Yes. Let me see if.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah, I can hear it. So let's read from here. And what I want you to do is, again, really focus not on this first bar for 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay? They're really singing on do, 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 off, do, 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 do. Time shall surely read. Is really, really difficult. The timing of that, oddly, ironically, is difficult. So let's try that from here. Again, John's going to lead us in and again. There you go. And John, if you can lead us through this section.
So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Yeah, that's great. So let's do that again. And then we have a little accent that's there. And so what we want to do again is make sure that the transition between 34 and 35 is very secure. So let's count for a second. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, off. 1, 2, 1, 2 to 1. Let's just try that together. Speaking 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2s. So from 34 with me, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. And again, this feels a little pedantic, but it's actually really good just to do a couple exercises before we sing it together so that we get the underlying pulse. Because the first part of bar 35 is actually a grouping of 3 eighth notes followed by a grouping of 2s. 1, 2, rest, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And so again with the music with John, let's sing through 34 and really be aware, even if we're singing do, 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 off, do, 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 do. So you get that rhythm very clear. Okay, John, if you don't mind giving us notes and then singing us through it again.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2.
when we go through sections like this is a type of thing where we look at the music as a whole and say, yes, eventually we want it to have a flow to it, but then you break it down and then you put it back together. So now let's take this one section as an example before we actually just kind of read through some other sections. But we go garden, garden. So when we sing garden, we know it that it's a long beat. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Time shall surely read. So let's just speak it while John plays it. Actually, that'll be a little hard because I can't speak it over John's playing. Let's just do, what I want you to do is John's going to play the same thing again, but we're going to speak the words over what he's doing and see if you can get those to be lined up. So John, if you don't mind counting us in again, you're going to play, but the rest of us are going to speak over what you do. Okay?
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2.
So that type of thing gets us to be a little more secure. And then I don't want it to be just, okay, we're going to look at the conductor to go, death, a time, So it's a little breakdown of those pieces and that section. But what I want to do is contrast it with another section, which is starting on, where is it? Fountain. So this is bar 60. And this is the towards the end. We'll sing it to the end. But you see that this is a grouping of 3, but that the syllable 10 of fountain is not on a strong beat. So we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, fountain, because we don't want that to be fountain. We don't want it to be accented. So let's read from here. John, if you don't mind giving us the notes for this section. Nice soprano and alto clash there. And then what we can just do is stumble through this and just kind of read through to the end. You can do it on words or text or do, whatever you want. But let's just read this to the end. John, if you don't mind counting us off.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2.
And then the tenor line, that really, really beautiful line. Why don't we have everybody sing bar 64, the tenor line, and the tenor line there, again being very aware of the 3 groups of 3s versus 2. Okay, feel free to read it with text and pitches. But John, if you can give us an E and then count us off, let's everybody sing the tenor line, bar 64.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Nice, just scale all the way down. Okay, why don't we read again from bar 60 to the end, and this time reading with the pitches and the text. Now everybody say fountain, fountain. Say fountain, fountain. Now what we want to do is, we can pronounce this word in a lot of different ways, but we want to try to, for singing, create a space. So I want to have a mountain of space for fountain. Now, fountain, fa, ah, as if you're singing fa, like the syllable fa, mi, re, do, right? It's a tall vowel. Fountain, not fountain, but fountain. Fountain, is a pure E vowel, steals, and then what we think is, THE is always the world. So you're not going to sing the, but the. When you sing the together, it sounds like the word the, but it also has singing space in it. So this is an exercise in English here, English diction. Fountain, steez, the, and then remember we don't sing an R, so you can go world, but was. And you want to make sure that you don't have that R creep in, because in English, R's can change the vowel, but for singing, we don't want it to change the vowel too much. So we don't want to sing the world. We don't want to sing it steals the world, but wah, and almost it's like you're saying W-H-A, okay? So why don't we do this, singing it with open vowels, and I want, John's gonna play us the notes along with us, but singing the words and pitches on the way down. Fountain, steals the world, and then this is the garden, colors come and go. Remember, singing like you have a little bit of Novocaine in your jaw and it's really relaxed and dropped. Okay, so John's gonna give us the notes of the opening pitches, and then we're gonna sing from 60 to the end.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Nice. Now, English is one of the hardest, obviously, languages not only to learn but also to sing, because it has all these diphthongs and whatnot. So, Erie Mills, who's in Livermore, you might know Erie Mills, works at the Met specifically for English diction. And, it's especially for Americans, you're like, wait, we know how to speak English, but not for singing. Again, something you've heard in normal rehearsals at BCCO for many years is not what you sing, it's what the audience hears. And our goal is to create beautiful sounds that give the impression of the words in the English language, not to sing what we speak. Because if we sang what we spoke, it's very, very difficult to get a beautiful tone, as well as to get uniformity in the vowels. Italian's one of our favorite languages to start learning how to sing, because there are very few vowels and they're all pure. And so you just have the E, A, A, O, U, but the E or E, you have very, very clear, pure vowels. Now, let's start looking at this from the very beginning and getting to learn some of it a little bit more. Now, we're accelerating rehearsals a bit because we only have 2 more rehearsals after this, just to kind of get an idea of these pieces. But we're going to do a little bit of incorporating how we feel these rhythms into our swing. So, this is the garden, colors come and go, frail azures fluttering from night. So instead of what we've been rehearsing, which is fluttering from night, ta, 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 now we're going to group these in groups of 2s and 3s and have a swing for the 3s. So this is the garden, colors come and go. Breath, frail azures fluttering from night's outer wing. Okay? So what I want to do is I want you to speak it with me conducting, and every single time we get to a group of 3, it should have this feeling of wee. This is the garden, colors come and go. So whereas before we were trying to subdivide the beats, so we have this good inner pulse and good subdivisions of the beats. Ta 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 ta, breath breath, ta 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 ta. Right, a little bit Scarface, like machine gunny. Now we're trying to get the flow of the poetry in. This is the garden, colors come and go. Here we try it together. Here, 1. Okay, I'll give you 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, and we'll sing. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, speaking. This is the garden, colors come and go. Breath, Frail ashes fluttering from night's outer wing. 1, 2, breath. Strong, silent, green, serenely lingering. Absolute lights like baths of golden snow lights like baths of golden snow. Okay, now it gets a little bit difficult. Obviously, I can't do two parts at the same time, but for the tenors and basses, bar 9, let's try that. Tenors and basses, or everybody try bar 9 singing the tenor and basses rhythm. Serenely lingering. So do you see this, that this is not exactly this type of emphases on the syllables that we normally have. We don't sing serenely lingering. And so Alice Parker put a little tenuto over the syllable serenely ling, so you know that you were supposed to put a little bit of weight where we normally put weight on that word. So it's serenely lingering, like baths of golden absolute lights. Okay, let's try tenor and bass line, starting bar 9. Everybody's speaking the rhythms, and you can do aggregate rhythm. If you want to switch between tenor and bass to get the whole rhythm, that's perfectly fine. Here we go. 1 bar in. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and serenely lingering like baths of golden absolute lights like baths of golden snow time. And this is the God, and lips do blow, pursed lips do blow, cool flutes within wide glooms. We want to hide a little bit, but it's really kind of fun. So let's do all 4 voice parts, starting from the beginning. I'm actually going to switch to my room because I'm running out of battery and I don't actually have the cord here. So I'm going to be dependent on John a little bit more. But for some reason, if in the elevator I lose you, I will snap back on. But I'm going to continue to try to speak while this is happening, while I make a transfer and bring my bag. There are still people checking out of the hotel. And it's really funny because they gave me the funniest looks. And they're like, what is going on here? It is very early in the morning here, though. So hold on a second. But, okay. So hopefully you can still hear me. And let's try this. In the elevator.
Ming, I think it froze.
This is going to snap out.
Did you say give pitches? Because it froze.
I'm still here somehow. Oh, wait. I saw... Can you hear me, John?
I can hear you great.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, wow. It didn't kick me out of Zoom for a second. Okay, great. So let's start from the beginning. And then, John, if you can actually play along with us. But the goal, again, everybody, is that we get that sort of swing into it. This is the garden, colors come and go. Frail ashes fluttering from night's outer wing. Off, okay? And so John's going to play along with us the pitches, but your focus should be not necessarily on singing, but really getting that sort of feel of the rhythm, okay?
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2.
That's fantastic. So now let's go back to bar 27, and only do the soprano line, and then the same thing, invisible face, not invisible faces, but every time you have the ending vowel, in English we tend to close it down a little bit. Invisible faces, faces. So you want to face has, and so invisible faces, faces hauntingly on, not and, but and slow. So everybody, let's do the rhythm of the sopranos in bar 27. Invisible faces hauntingly and slow. And what I want you to do is really focus on those tall vowels. So so not but eh. You see the difference in my mouth shape here? And so versus You can drop your jaw quite a bit. Invisible, invisible, invisible faces. Let's try that together. So sopranos. So sorry, everybody singing this, speaking in rhythm the soprano line. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3, and invisible faces hauntingly and slow. Okay, now let's do this with John playing pick up to bar 27, all voice parts. But what I want you to do is speak in rhythm your particular line. So tenors, you have a very similar line, but it's different enough from the sopranos to be notable. But you have to make sure that your first entrance is a quarter note versus the soprano's eighth note. So yours is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, invisible faces, whereas sopranos again are invisible faces. But John's going to play pick up to bar 27 and count us off for a bar beforehand. But we're going to try to speak in rhythm where our respective voice parts are.
I'll give you the 6 pickup beats. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, go.
To me, this the invisible faces is great when it comes in all canon, like with one entrance after the other. But the fun part to me is the word haunting, because haunting coming in different places is very, very evocative. And so the idea of it never being on a strong beat, you see that in the basses and sopranos bar 28, you sing 1, 2 hauntingly. And so it's not hauntingly, it's not really, really strong. Tenors in bar 27, 8, 9, 29, you have the same thing. You have 1, 2 hauntingly. And the altos on bar 30 are the only ones that sing hauntingly with a really nice strong, well, rather on the strong beat. And so, can you just do this is for a rehearsal for sopranos, tenors, and basses. We're just going to think 1, 2, hauntingly. Okay, let's try that together. I'll give you one full bar before we enter, plus the extra 2 beats. So it's going to sound like this: 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, hauntingly. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, hauntingly. So you really come in on an offbeat. 1, 2, ha, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, hauntingly. Okay, let's do this again with John playing pick up to bar 27, exactly what we did before, but being aware of, again, when it gets a little messy and everybody's singing in different places on bars 28 and 29, being very clear and hopefully where you are in those. If you feel comfortable enough to try singing on the pitches, feel free to go right ahead. If you can focus on only the rhythm of the words, feel free to just focus on that. The goal is really to have good rhythmic control over this. Pick up to bar 27 with John.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, go.
Nice. And then continuing on, this is a part that we looked at before, but with the opening though. So we're looking at bar 33. If John, you can give us those pitches. Nice, huge, warm chord, and you're supposed to sing it warmly. So the same thing. Now, we've been thinking about this many, many times. When we have a long note, what is the underlying eighth note pulse? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2 is the God. This is a garden. Let's read this for a little bit, starting from bar 33, where it says warmly. And John will lead us through. This section which should sound a little bit more familiar and have a little bit more context. Starting bar 33, and we're going to go for a little bit, John.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Now, do you see that there are some echoes that we've seen of other things here? So we looked at the very end, and we saw that the tenors have this beautiful long line scale. So if you look at bar 35, 6, 7, bar 37, reap shall surely reap, right? That is a preview of the scale that comes down, right? We saw this echoing the hauntingly invisible faces hauntingly. And you have this text, other songs. John, do you mind playing? Nobody will sing, but starting from pick up to bar 43 in other lands where
Soprano only or everything?
just everybody.
Sure.
And you see, that is very similar to that section that we just learned before. And so this is where everything starts to sort of incorporate really beautifully together, because those sections sort of echo and refer to different sections. And that is what gives listeners and us too sort of that reminiscent feel, that very sort of familiar feel. It's just like these little references. Let's sing with words from Warmly. This is bar 33. This is a garden. And then, of course, this is an important part in the piece itself, too. This is a garden, time shall surely reap, and on death's blade many a flower curled, in other lands where other songs be sung. yet stands they here enraptured, as among the slow deep trees perpetual of sleep, some silver finger, and it goes on, fountain steals the world. Such beautiful, evocative writing. So starting from bar 33, read to the end.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Yeah, such a gorgeous, gorgeous piece, gorgeous poetry, E. Cummings. And so the next step with this is that there is a recording of this that we have online and we have in the BCCO resources. And so what would be good is for you to sing along with it and get a feeling of the piece. Now, the tempo might be completely different. I honestly don't remember what the recording's tempo is. But the idea is really to never forget that sort of those swinging threes versus twos. This is the garden, colors come and go. And to really get that sort of feeling of the rhythm of the text as in the music, as set in the music. It's an absolute gorgeous piece. Okay, now because we did focus on Gabriella Lena Frank, we're going to skip the Livy Larson, but come back to it obviously next week. But let's go to the third piece, which is Gabby's piece. And then as Julia was mentioning, Gabby is this phenomenal composer. But you might know her too because she's been composer in residence at Berkeley Symphony for a few years. She's always been on an artistic advisory committee. She's had her works played by billions of different orchestras all over the world and is an amazing person and whatnot. And so we're looking at Sun Quilt on page 28 of the PDF if you're looking at that. But as we talked about last week, even though this looks like it's very much more complicated because there's all these accidentals and the rhythms look a little funny, in reality, we found out that it's actually quite simple because those accidentals are only there because there is no sort of key signature. So she's actually just writing in most of the stuff. The harmonies aren't very difficult. And then we found out that the rhythm is actually a very straight rhythm, but it's stylized. And she wants that stylized rhythm to be there while the rhythm itself is just as if they're straight eighth notes. They just have different lengths to the eighth notes. So what we're going to do is we're going to read from the beginning. And then what I want to do is read at least the first 2 pages because, again, we already know the text there. But this is a danger, as always, just like singing in English. We think we know how to hum, but we oftentimes hum with a closed lip, a closed jaw. And with singing, that really stops the sound. And so what I want you to really do is do like we did in the exercises in the warm-up, which is as if you're singing with an open mouth, but your lips are barely touching, okay? And so, why don't we have John read us through the beginning part of this, starting for the first 2 pages. And if you don't mind giving us opening pitches as well.
One, two, three, go.
Great. Now, for the tenors, basses, or sometimes, let's say sopranos too, or altos or whatnot, um, it's sometimes a little bit difficult to sing one pitch, wait a little bit, then sing another pitch because you lose sort of where you used to be. So let's do this again. And what I want you to do is I want you to just sustain your note through it. And so you have an idea of exactly where your next note is in relation to the note that you previously had. Excuse me. And then so let's do that same thing again. And then sopranos, feel free to open up with the sun. And let's go on a little bit after that because I want to continue with the humming that goes through. But feel free if you have different text, like basses are the next voice part after sopranos have text to go through. And let's read a little bit of this going through it with John from the beginning.
1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and.
It's a beautiful piece. I think somebody commented actually earlier that they thought Gabby's piece sounded a little bit like the Andean walkabout that Julia played, that it had some similar characteristics. And, I think it's an open fifths plus the fourths, the parallel fourths at the very end. This idea, this sort of gives it that color. It's really, really gorgeous. One of the things I really like about this piece is that while the humming has those individual phraselets, those little parts that sort of kind of all come together, when we sing the text rather, it is long. It always, like bar 16, he goes to bed. It always has a lyricism in a line. And so there's a very big texture change between these long lines and these hums. So what I want to do is focus on some of those melodies first. And so let's have everybody look at the sopranos bar 8 into 9. The sun has such a pretty quilt. And I want to sing through that line. And first, a couple things. It's not sun, but san, like you're going to sing S-A-N. And remember, T-H-E is always the san. So you're really going to sing it like the san. It feels a little stilted, but it really is the best singing technique to make tall vowels. John, if you don't mind singing, leading us through the soprano line for those few bars, pick up into bar 9.
I'll give you 3 beats. 1 and 2 and 3.
Now, if you were the conductor, one of the decisions you have to make is pretty quilt. How stylized, how do you want to approach that rhythm? You could sing it like this, pretty quilt, right? Or you can sing it as pretty quilt. You can make it long. Now, given the discussion that we did beforehand about the different textures, what would be your choice in if you want this to be sung through and long, or a little bit more rhythmic? You feel free to write in the text. Yeah, definitely long, right? So immediately you can start to see the two different types. If you have the humming, and that's more sort of like, again, caressing, and we said sospiro, a little bit like long, sort of with a little bit of pulse to it, versus the long singing. Okay, so let's try this again. And what I'd love to do is have all 4 voice parts starting from the beginning and sing through at least a few pages and see what we can have in these last few minutes. Okay, starting from the very beginning. Actually, sorry, before that. So remember that that you're really going to get sort of a feeling of caressing, dee dee dee, very pulsing, and again, sighing sound. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
1, 2, 3, 4.
It's such a beautiful, 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 beautiful work. And all of these works obviously have so much nuance to them and so much to unpack in them. John, we want to say thank you, of course, for having you join us. And it's a treat, obviously, to have you here, even if by Zoom, even if you're in, you're in the keyboard
My
room.
pleasure. Thank you for having me, Megan. It's great to hear everyone in my head. I know you're all singing beautifully, so it's just wonderful to be here.
And then if you follow John on Instagram, you should look for him because he is also a fantastic chef. And so his Instagram feed is like mine, or it's like filled with food.
I'd swear we were not musicians. It's insane. But enjoy the Tuscan steak that I see you've been having, Ming, and enjoy yourself.
Yeah, yeah, it's great to hear from you and hear you play and stuff. And look forward to the next time I see you in person too. So,
Absolutely.
okay,
See you around and take care, everyone.
okay, thank you, John.
You will.
As we go into this last bit of rehearsal, yes, so this summer series, unfortunately, does not have a performance that we're going through, and it is very, very quick to try to do 5 pieces in 4 rehearsals like this, especially because these rehearsals are sort of shorter anyway. So it is a sort of a hyper speed version of it. It is it's stuff. The thing that I chafe against is everybody, I'm sure here because this is Berkeley, talks about is just like clearly this piece was commissioned because they're just like, oh, we want to get female composers, we want to get 5 female composers, but you can tell that they're like the most like they're phenomenal composers that should be played more often, right? And so as we dive into these works and you see how amazing they are, it's like they shouldn't just be because there are 5 female composers all together that we're doing them, right? It's really are because like Gabriella Lena Frank is one of the preeminent composers of today. That Libby Larson is one of the most phenomenal composers of today. And so as a result, as you can see in these rehearsals, there's just so much in the music that we want to get out of it, right? And if we were in person, we'd be working on those shaping of those phrases, you know, and getting that color right. Because to me, there's something very tender about that, and that we want to get the changes in the texture between the long lines. That can you imagine just like a soprano soloist just soaring, right? And that is underneath that texture and the solo voices or these like long solo section voices singing over that texture. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And then of course hello, can you hear me again? Okay, great. What I was saying is that hotels with their internet sometimes it like resets, so I'm always worried that it's going to reset at a certain point. But you can tell that the sunlight is coming out. It is like daytime now, so I'm really excited. But what I was saying is that in your brain, the way we do rehearsals is whole and break it up into parts and then put it back together in whole, and that mimics how your brain learns it. And so at the beginning, it's really important to be hyper aware of those rhythms: top, pop, 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 pop. But what ends up happening is that becomes foremost in our thinking, and then as we get used to it, it becomes further and further in the background, and then we can put the text on top of that. So we don't think about when we're performing, this is the garden car, but we get that feeling of phrasing, this is the garden colors go and glow and go. And so we don't have that rhythm in the forefront anymore. It's been incorporated into our body and our thinking, and that it just becomes a natural underlying pulse in the background, not only in our brain, but how we sing it and how it reverberates throughout the rest of our singing, right? And so it's really, really beautiful, beautiful stuff. Now, unfortunately, I can't go back to the piano anymore because it's now 6 o'clock in the morning and people are actually checking out. So I can't do a sing-along at the end with Paul. And we love Paul and his sing-alongs and he's not here. And Paul's like, I'm so sorry, I can send you some music. And I'm just like, I would love music. But so we're gonna have to have Paul do extra ones at the end because it's always a lot of fun. But I wanna say that next week, we're going back to Jack Tripp. And so we're going to have opportunity to be able to work on some of these nuances together. But every single one of these pieces has its own texture, has its own sort of heart to what makes it important. And so I want to really feel like we can get, if not all the details of every single note and the pronunciations and whatnot, but sort of the feeling of what makes it musical, what makes it special. Like we learned in the Gabriella Frank, it's like da dum beadim 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 beadim, that sort of feeling versus the long lyrical line. And so if we get that taste of it, then we know what that piece really is about. You know, we're gonna work on notes, rhythms, and whatnot. The very first piece, This Is the Garden, is the rhythm of the speech. This is the garden, colors come and go, right? And that sort of feeling that isn't sort of disjunct. Sometimes when we have like uneven meters, like sevens and fives and whatnot, not a regular sort of feeling, it feels a little disjunct, but this is sort of because it's built around the text. So as quote assignment, if you'd like to, obviously go to the resources and try to listen to these pieces, try to listen to the soundtracks and whatnot. And then, I have the idea of those pieces as we look at these next ones. We're gonna look at a little bit more the first and third, Gabriella Lena Frank's and Alice Parker's piece. But then again, we're gonna look at 2, 4, and 5. So it's really gonna be all 5 of them, but only touching up a little bit on the ones that we looked at a little bit more today. And then getting to the heart of it, of the second, fourth, and fifth pieces. And then the rehearsal after that is going to be sort of a deep dive with all of them again, in very much like we did in the first rehearsal, but much more singing through and again, getting to the heart of it. So thank you, everybody. Let's feel free to unmute and say bye, but it was great to see everybody. I'm gonna how do I unspeaker?
Bye, everyone.
Hi.
Okay.
Hi, Sarah.
Thank you, Ming.
Thank you, Ming.
Thank you.
Hey,
Thanks so
Joel.
much, Ming. It was fabulous. Really fabulous.
Rad. Everything.
Speak some Czech.
Bring home a doggy bag for us.
Because the last time I was in Prague was with BCCO.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
Orchestra Requiem.
Yeah,
Enjoy, really enjoy yourself.
Yes.
Before Monday.
Yeah, I'll be back by Monday, so see you
Get
later.
some sleep.
Safe travel, safe trip.
Yes. Safe travels.
Okay, bye everybody. Bye.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye. Thank you. Yeah.
Nice music, boy.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
Incredible.
Yeah.
He certainly gets around.
Right, he does.
So Ignacio's going to show us how to get to those tracks, right?
I will try. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah. If one of you will help me with the stupid mic, I could do a alto practice, but I can't get the mic to work.
I just want to let me share my screen. I mean, we can do a sing along. I have tracks here, but